multi-millionaire CEO risked his entire empire by pretending to be poor. You won't believe what happened next. The rain came down in sheets across lower Manhattan, turning the sidewalk outside Meridian Tech into a river of neon reflections. Emma Lawson stood under the building's awning, her phone clutched in one hand, mascara-streaked tears mixing with rainwater on her cheeks. Behind her, through the glass doors, the charity gala continued, a glittering spectacle of New York's elite, celebrating another year of innovation and excess. "You're being dramatic, Emma." Derek's voice still echoed in her ears, cold and dismissive. "Nobody's going to believe you work for Adrian Calloway. You're a junior analyst. You probably don't even know what he looks like." She'd tried to explain. Tried to tell her ex-boyfriend, the man who dumped her 6 months ago for someone more established, that yes, she did work at Meridian Tech. Yes, she did report to the CEO, even if only through layers of management. But Derek had laughed, his new girlfriend Sienna clinging to his arm like a designer accessory, and the humiliation had burned so hot, Emma thought she might combust right there on the marble floor. Now she stood in the rain, wondering why she'd even come to this thing. The gala had been Adrian's idea. Mandatory fun, he'd called it in the company-wide email, his dry humor evident even in corporate speak. Emma had bought a dress she couldn't afford, hoping to prove to herself more than anyone that she'd moved on, that she was thriving. Instead, she'd walked straight into Derek's orbit and discovered that some wounds don't heal. They just wait for the worst possible moment to reopen. The doors behind her whooshed open. She didn't turn around. You know, most people go inside to escape the rain, not the other way around. Emma's spine straightened. She recognized that voice, low, measured, with the faintest trace of amusement threading through it. She'd heard it in exactly 3 settings: earnings calls, the rare all-hands meeting, and one memorable elevator ride where she'd been too terrified to breathe, let alone speak. Adrian Calloway stood beside her now, raindrops darkening the shoulders of his tuxedo. He wasn't looking at her, just staring out at the downpour with an expression that suggested he found the weather more interesting than the party he was technically hosting. "I needed air," Emma managed, horrified by how thick her voice sounded. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, an actual cloth handkerchief, because apparently billionaire CEOs still carried those, and held it out without fanfare. "You've got..." He gestured vaguely at his own face. Emma took it, mortification flooding through her as she dabbed at her mascara. Of course Adrian Calloway would witness her publicly falling apart. The universe had a sick sense of timing. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway." "Adrian." He said it simply, like it didn't matter. Like the 37-year-old genius who'd built a tech empire from his MIT dorm room was just another guy standing in the rain. "And you're Emma Lawson, Data Analytics. You sent me that report on market inefficiencies last month." She blinked. "You read that?" "I read everything that makes it past 3 layers of bureaucracy and still manages to be interesting." The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "Yours was both. Your analysis on the Southeast Asian market was particularly sharp." Something warm unfurled in Emma's chest, momentarily displacing the humiliation. "I didn't think anyone above my direct supervisor even saw those reports. Most don't." He turned to look at her then, and Emma found herself caught in the full force of his attention. His eyes were dark gray, almost charcoal, with an intensity that made her understand why people in boardrooms either loved him or feared him. "But I'm not most people." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but she recognized Sienna's profile picture in the preview. "Derek says you're still lying about knowing Adrian Calloway." Pathetic. Emma's fingers tightened on the phone. The warm feeling evaporated, replaced by a familiar ache. The one that whispered she wasn't enough, would never be enough, that Derek had been right to leave her for someone more polished, more confident, more established. Bad news? Adrian's voice had lost its amusement. Just, Emma shook her head. People being people. He studied her for a moment, something calculating moving behind his eyes. Then, inexplicably, he smiled. A real smile this time, sharp and conspiratorial. You want to make someone very, very sorry they underestimated you? Emma's heart skipped. What? I'm asking if you trust me for approximately 60 seconds. He held out his hand, palm up, rain gathering in the creases. Because I have an idea that's either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. And I won't know which until we try it. She should say no. Should thank him politely, return his handkerchief, and call a lift to take her back to her studio apartment in Astoria. Instead, she found herself thinking about Derek's laugh, about Sienna's pitying look, about every time someone had dismissed her as too young, too inexperienced, too junior to matter. Emma placed her hand in Adrian's. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, certain. Lead the way. The ballroom hushed the moment they entered. Emma felt it like a physical thing. Hundreds of conversations trailing off mid-sentence, champagne glasses pausing halfway to lips, the string quartet suddenly too loud in the silence. Adrian kept his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to exist in any space. There's a rhythm to these things, he murmured, close enough that only she could hear. The key is to look like you're exactly where you belong, and nowhere else matters. Even when you're terrified? Especially then. His thumb traced a small circle against her spine. Probably unconscious, definitely distracting. Terror and confidence use the same biochemical pathways. The body can't tell the difference. Is that scientific fact or something you tell yourself before earnings calls? He laughed, a genuine sound that made several nearby heads turn. Both, actually. They moved deeper into the room, and Emma caught sight of her reflection in one of the massive gilt mirrors lining the walls. The girl looking back seemed like a stranger, poised, elegant, her hand claimed by one of the most powerful men in the city. For a moment, she almost believed it herself. Then she saw Derek. He stood near the bar with Sienna, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something that looked uncomfortably like anger. Sienna had gone pale, her carefully constructed composure cracking at the edges. Second thoughts? Adrian's voice remained neutral, but his hand pressed more firmly against her back. No. Emma lifted her chin. No second thoughts. Good. He steered them directly toward the bar, his trajectory unmistakable. Because we're committed now, and I've never been good at half measures. They stopped just close enough to Derek and Sienna to make conversation inevitable. Emma watched her ex's throat work as he swallowed, clearly trying to formulate words that wouldn't come. Derek. Emma kept her voice pleasant, detached. Fancy seeing you here. Emma, He glanced between her and Adrian, recalculation happening in real time behind his eyes. I didn't realize that you and Mr. Calloway were together, Adrian supplied smoothly. His arm slid fully around Emma's waist now, a claiming gesture that sent heat flooding through her, despite, or maybe because of, its calculated nature. We've been keeping it quiet. Emma values her privacy. The lie should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like justice. Sienna made a small sound of distress. Derek's face had gone red, the color creeping up from his collar. Congratulations. That's great. Really great. Thank you. Emma smiled, and meant it. We should get back to the party. Adrian has several board members he needs to speak with. They moved away before Derek could respond. Adrian's hand never leaving her waist. Once they were out of earshot, Emma released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. That was petty, Adrian suggested. Juvenile? Deeply satisfying? All of the above. She laughed, slightly hysterical. Oh God, I can't believe we just did that. We can undo it if you want. He said it casually, but there was something careful in his tone. I can go back right now and explain it was a misunderstanding. You'll be embarrassed for approximately 48 hours, and then everyone will forget because someone else will do something more scandalous. Emma considered it. The smart choice, the safe choice, would be to end this now before it spiraled into something complicated. But when she looked up at Adrian, really looked at him, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Not pity, not amusement. Just curiosity, like she was a puzzle he hadn't quite solved yet. Or, she asked, or we commit to the bit. His mouth quirked. Fair warning, I'm a terrible actor, and everyone in this room knows exactly how much time I spend at the office, which means if we're going to sell this, we'll need to sell it thoroughly. Define thoroughly. Public appearances. Coordination on our stories. You'd need to attend certain events as my partner. He paused. And I'd need to actually get to know you well enough to make this remotely believable. Emma's pulse quickened. Why would you do this? For someone you barely know? Adrian was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting across the ballroom, the glittering crowd, the excess, the performance of it all. When he looked back at her, something had shifted in his expression. Because 6 months ago, I stood in a rainstorm after my father's funeral and decided I was tired of living inside someone else's expectations, he said quietly. And tonight, you looked like you might understand what that feels like. The honesty of it stole her breath. This wasn't the Adrian Calloway of Forbes profiles and earnings calls. This was someone else entirely. Someone raw and real and somehow lonelier than she'd ever imagined a billionaire could be. Okay, Emma heard herself say. Let's commit to the bit. His smile was slow, genuine, and absolutely devastating. Then we should probably start acting like a couple who's been together long enough to look comfortable. And how do we do that? Adrian's hand found hers, fingers interlacing with an ease that should have been impossible for two people who'd barely spoken before tonight. We start small. We talk like humans. We figure out if there's anything real underneath all this performance. He led her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the scrutiny of the crowd. And for the first time all evening, Emma felt like she could breathe. Tell me something true, Adrian said. Something that's not on your employment file. Emma thought about it, then decided if they were doing this, she might as well be honest. I'm terrified I'm going to wake up one day and realize I've been fooling everyone, including myself. That I'm not actually good at this job. I've just been lucky. Imposter syndrome. He nodded. Common among high achievers. Statistically, it means you're probably excellent at what you do. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. Definitely intentional this time. Your turn to ask. Why did your father's funeral make you tired of expectations? Something flickered across his face. Pain, regret. Something deeper. Because I spent 36 years trying to become the version of myself he wanted. And when he died, I realized he never actually knew me at all. Just the empire I built to prove I was worth noticing. The vulnerability in his voice made Emma's chest ache. Without thinking, she squeezed his hand. Adrian looked down at their joined fingers, something like surprise crossing his features. We're going to be terrible at this, Emma said softly. The pretending part. Probably. But he didn't let go of her hand. Should we try anyway? And standing there in the corner of a ballroom full of people who thought they knew exactly who Adrian Calloway was, Emma felt something shift, some tectonic plate of possibility sliding into place beneath her feet. "Yeah," she whispered. "Let's try anyway." The pretending started small. A lunch meeting at a sidewalk cafe in Soho, where Adrian ordered the wrong coffee 3 times because he kept getting distracted by the way Emma's eyes lit up when she talked about data patterns. A walk through Central Park on a Wednesday afternoon, where they were supposed to be seen together, but instead spent 2 hours debating whether artificial intelligence would save or destroy humanity. "You're surprisingly pessimistic for someone who built an AI company," Emma said, tossing breadcrumbs to a particularly aggressive pigeon. "I'm realistic." Adrian leaned back on the bench, his suit jacket abandoned, sleeves rolled to his elbows in a way that should have been illegal. "We're building tools we don't fully understand, and trusting market forces to regulate their development. History suggests this ends badly. So why do it? Because someone's going to do it regardless, and I'd rather it be someone who occasionally thinks about the consequences." He watched the pigeons squabble over crumbs. "My father used to say that ethics were a luxury afforded to people who didn't need to win. I think that's exactly backward. Ethics are what matter most when you're winning." Emma studied his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way tension gathered at his temples when he talked about his father. In the 2 weeks since the gala, she'd learned that Adrian Calloway was nothing like the man the press portrayed. He was funnier, more uncertain, more human than the tech wunderkind of magazine covers. It was becoming a problem. "What?" Adrian had caught her staring. "Nothing. Just thinking. Dangerous." But he was smiling. That private smile he seemed to reserve only for her. "Share. I was thinking that this is getting complicated." "The pretending?" "Everything." Adrian's smile faded. He turned to face her fully, and Emma found herself caught again in the intensity of his attention. "Emma, we should talk about..." His phone buzzed, then again, and again. He glanced at the screen, and his expression went carefully blank. "What is it?" "Press." He showed her the phone. TMZ had posted photos of them from 3 different outings, each with increasingly breathless headlines. Tech Billionaire's secret romance was the tamest. The others speculated about everything from workplace impropriety to elaborate corporate schemes. Emma's stomach dropped. Oh God. It's fine. This was always going to happen. But his jaw had tightened, and she recognized the look, the one that meant Adrian Calloway was already 3 steps ahead, calculating variables and planning contingencies. "What do we do?" "We stay the course. This dies down in a week or 2 if we don't feed it." He pocketed his phone. "Unless you want out." "I'd understand if..." "No." Emma surprised herself with the vehemence. "I mean, not unless you want out." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or something more complicated. "I don't." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they weren't saying pressing down between them. The pretending had stopped feeling like pretending sometime in the last 2 weeks, and they both knew it. "Emma." Adrian's voice had gone quiet, serious. "I need to tell you something." Her heart kicked against her ribs. "Okay." "The night of the gala, I didn't just happen to walk outside. I'd been watching you through the window." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "You looked destroyed and angry and so completely real in a room full of people performing themselves. And I thought I wanted to know what that felt like." What felt like? Being that honest, that undefended. He finally looked at her, and the raw need in his expression made her breath catch. "I've spent my entire adult life being Adrian Calloway, the CEO, the genius, the success story, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to just be." Emma reached for his hand without thinking. You're doing it right now. Only with you. His fingers tightened around hers. That's the problem. Why is that a problem? Because you work for me. Because this started as a lie. Because I'm 15 years older than you and have enough baggage to fill a cargo plane. Because... He stopped, jaw working. Because the more time I spend with you, the less I remember why any of those things should matter. The confession hung between them, trembling and dangerous. Emma knew she should say something sensible, something that acknowledged all the very real reasons this was a terrible idea. Instead, she found herself thinking about the way Adrian's entire face transformed when he laughed, the way he listened like her words actually mattered, the way he'd trusted her with pieces of himself he showed no one else. Adrian, she started, but her phone buzzed insistently in her purse. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. You should check that, Adrian said, though he looked like he'd rather she throw the phone into the lake. Emma pulled it out, and her blood went cold. 15 missed calls from her direct supervisor. 6 texts, each more urgent than the last, and 1 email from Human Resources with the subject line, Urgent, Meeting Required. What's wrong? Adrian had gone still beside her. I think... Emma's voice felt distant. I think someone reported our relationship to HR. The HR office was everything Emma had imagined a corporate nightmare would be. Sterile white walls, uncomfortable chairs, and a woman named Patricia who smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. Ms. Lawson, thank you for coming in on such short notice. Patricia folded her hands on the desk, the picture of professional concern. I'm sure you understand why we needed to speak with you. Emma sat rigid in her chair, every muscle locked. Adrian had wanted to come with her, but she'd refused. This was her career on the line, her reputation. She needed to handle it herself. I understand, Emma managed. Good. Then you'll understand that Meridian Tech has very strict policies regarding relationships between employees, particularly when there's a significant power differential involved. Patricia's smile never wavered. Dating the CEO presents certain complications. We're not... Emma stopped herself. They were dating, or pretending to date, or doing something in between that she couldn't begin to define. It's complicated. I'm sure it is. Patricia slid a folder across the desk. These are your options. You can transfer to a different division, one where you wouldn't fall under Mr. Calloway's chain of command, or you can end the relationship. Or we can begin termination proceedings, for the good of the company. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma had known this was coming, had felt it hovering at the edges since those photos went viral. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way her anxiety couldn't match. I see. Ms. Lawson, I want you to understand that this isn't personal. You're an excellent employee. But the appearance of impropriety? The appearance? Emma felt something snap inside her. I'm sorry, but isn't HR supposed to care about actual impropriety? About whether anyone's been harassed or coerced? Because I can assure you, that's not what's happening here. Patricia's smile finally cracked. The optics are only a problem if you make them one. Emma stood, surprising herself with her steadiness. I'm not transferring. I'm not quitting. And I'm certainly not ending a relationship because it makes someone else uncomfortable. So if you want to fire me, you'll need to do better than optics. She left before Patricia could respond, adrenaline carrying her through the door and down the hallway. It wasn't until she reached the elevator that her hands started shaking. The doors opened. Adrian stood inside, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the last hour. You waited, Emma said stupidly. Of course I waited. He studied her face, reading things she hadn't said. What happened? Emma stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed behind her, sealing them in temporary privacy. They gave me an ultimatum. Transfer, end things with you, or accept termination. Adrian's expression went cold. Not angry, but something far more dangerous. The CEO look, the one that preceded billion-dollar decisions and destroyed careers. Patricia Chen? She was just doing her job. Her job is to protect the company from liability, not to threaten valued employees for having personal lives. He pulled out his phone. I'll handle this. No. Emma grabbed his wrist. Adrian, you can't. That's exactly what they'll expect. The powerful CEO protecting his girlfriend. It'll only make things worse. Then what do you suggest? I don't know. The admission felt like defeat. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is inappropriate. You're my boss, indirectly. The power dynamic is only a problem if I abuse it, which I would never do. Adrian's voice had gone rough. Emma, look at me. She did. His eyes were storm dark, intense with something that made her heart stutter. If you want to end this, whatever this is, end it because you want to. Because you don't feel what I feel, or because you think I'm too old or too damaged or too obsessed with work. End it for any real reason. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. But don't end it because someone else thinks the optics are problematic. Emma's breath caught. And what do you feel? Terrified, he admitted. I feel absolutely terrified that I'm going to screw this up, that I'm going to hurt you, or disappoint you, or wake up one day and realize I've become my father, so consumed by the empire that I forgot what I was building it for. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. But I also feel more myself with you than I have in 20 years, and that's worth being terrified. The confession broke something open in Emma's chest. All the careful distance she'd been maintaining, all the reminders that this had started as pretense, none of it mattered anymore. Not when Adrian Calloway stood in an elevator looking at her like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. I told Patricia I wouldn't end things with you, Emma whispered. I didn't even think about it. I just refused. Adrian's eyes searched hers. And now? Now I'm terrified too. She let herself trace the line of his jaw, feeling the tension gathered there. Because this stopped being pretend somewhere between the coffee shop and the park bench, and I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone like you when I'm still figuring out who I even am. Then we figure it out together. His hand settled at her waist, steadying. No more pretending. No more performance. Just us. However messy that gets. The elevator dinged. They'd reached the ground floor without either of them noticing. The doors slid open to reveal the lobby, full of employees and visitors and the ever-present performance of corporate life. Emma looked at Adrian, really looked at him, and made a choice. Okay, she said. Just us. He smiled, and it was nothing like his public smile. Too wide, too genuine, too completely unguarded. Then he took her hand, laced their fingers together, and walked her out of the building into the chaos of a Manhattan afternoon. Behind them, Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. We'll need to schedule a follow-up meeting. Emma deleted it without reading the rest. Adrian's penthouse overlooked Central Park from 30 stories up, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist design that screamed expensive architect. Emma stood at the glass, watching the city lights blur into constellations, and tried to remember how she'd ended up here. The HR meeting had been 3 days ago. In the aftermath, Adrian had been different. More present somehow, less guarded. He'd started showing up at her desk with coffee, learning her order by heart. They'd had lunch in his office with the door deliberately open, discussing market projections and code optimization like it was foreplay. It felt like courtship, like he was proving something to her, or maybe to himself. "You're overthinking again," Adrian said from somewhere behind her. "I can literally see the gears turning." Emma turned to find him in the kitchen, a sleek modern space he clearly never used, attempting to open a bottle of wine. He'd changed out of his suit into jeans and a worn MIT t-shirt that made him look younger, more accessible. "I'm not overthinking. I'm thinking an appropriate amount. About why I'm in your apartment at 9 p.m. on a Friday night when we could have gone to any restaurant in the city." Adrian abandoned the wine bottle, moving toward her with that predatory grace that made her pulse skip. "Because I wanted you all to myself, and because every restaurant in Manhattan would have photographers waiting outside." He stopped just close enough to touch, but didn't. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay, it's..." Emma struggled for words. "I like this version of you, the one who wears old t-shirts and can't open wine bottles." "I can open wine bottles." But he was smiling. "I'm choosing not to. Builds character." "You're ridiculous. I'm smitten." He said it simply, like it was a fact rather than a confession. "Completely, irrationally smitten with a woman who calls me ridiculous and means it as a compliment." Emma's heart kicked. "Adrian, I need to tell you something." He moved past her to stare out at the park, hands shoved in his pockets. "About why I really approached you that night at the gala." Something in his tone made Emma's stomach drop. "Okay. You said your ex didn't believe you worked for me, that he thought you were lying." Adrian's jaw worked. "The truth is I'd seen you before, multiple times. You came to a company presentation 6 months ago and asked a question that made our CTO sweat. You sent that market analysis report that was better than anything our strategy team had produced. You existed in my peripheral vision as this anomaly, someone I couldn't quite categorize. I don't understand. When I saw you crying in the rain, I recognized you immediately. And I thought, God, this sounds terrible. I thought here was someone who understood what it felt like to be underestimated. Someone smart and real and completely unimpressed by the performance." He turned to face her. "So when I offered to help, it wasn't just altruism. It was selfishness. I wanted an excuse to talk to you." Emma processed this, her mind cataloging implications. So the whole thing, the fake relationship, the public appearances, that was all manufactured? The circumstances were manufactured. What I felt wasn't. Adrian moved closer, his expression raw. "Emma, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you for 6 months. The gala just gave me permission to finally do something about it. She should feel manipulated, used. Instead, she felt seen. Like every moment of the last few weeks suddenly made sense in a way they hadn't before. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because we agreed on honesty. No more pretending." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "And because I'm about to kiss you, and I need you to know exactly what that means. That this isn't performance. That I've wanted this since the moment you put your hand in mine and decided to trust me." Emma's breath caught. "And if I don't want you to kiss me, then I won't. Simple, certain." "Your choice, Emma. Always your choice." She looked at him, really looked, at this complicated, brilliant, unexpectedly vulnerable man who'd spent 6 months noticing her from across a corporate divide, who'd risked his company's reputation to give her a moment of vindication, who'd chosen honesty over comfort, even when the truth made him look calculating. Emma rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was 6 months of peripheral awareness, and 2 weeks of careful restraint, and 3 days of pretending they could keep this professional all collapsing into a single point of contact. Adrian made a sound low in his throat. his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I'm still terrified," he admitted. "Me too." Emma's hands had somehow ended up twisted in his shirt. "But I'm also... this. Whatever this is." "Yeah." His thumb traced her lower lip. "Whatever this is." They stood there in the window overlooking Manhattan, the city spreading out beneath them like a promise. And for the first time in longer than Emma could remember, she felt exactly where she belonged. Adrian's phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. "You should check that," Emma murmured against his mouth. "Absolutely not." But the phone kept buzzing, insistent and angry. Finally, Adrian pulled back with a muttered curse and grabbed it from the counter. His expression changed instantly, every line of his body going rigid. "What is it?" "It's the board." His voice had gone flat, emotionless. "Someone sent them the HR complaint. They're calling an emergency meeting to discuss my conduct unbecoming of a CEO." Emma's blood went cold. "They can't. They can do whatever they want. I serve at their pleasure." He was already moving, transformation happening in real time as Adrian Calloway the man became Adrian Calloway the CEO. "I need to go. The meeting's in an hour." "I'm coming with you." "No." He stopped, turned back. "Emma, this could get ugly. If they think you influenced company decisions, if they question your role, let them." She grabbed her jacket. "You said no more pretending. That means we face this together." Adrian looked at her for a long moment, something like wonder crossing his face. Then he kissed her again, quick, fierce, grateful. "Together," he agreed. And they walked out into the night, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The Meridian Tech boardroom was designed to intimidate. A long mahogany table, leather chairs that cost more than Emma's monthly rent, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. 11 board members sat in judgment, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly hostile. Emma wasn't supposed to be there. Adrian had made that clear in the elevator, but she'd followed him anyway, slipping into the back of the room before anyone could object. Adrian, Victoria Chen, no relation to Patricia, but equally formidable, sat at the head of the table, her silver hair pulled back severe enough to hurt. "We appreciate you coming on such short notice." "Cut the pleasantries, Victoria." Adrian remained standing, a tactical choice that made him look commanding rather than defensive. "You called an emergency meeting to discuss my personal life. Let's not pretend this is about appreciation." A ripple of discomfort moved through the board. Emma recognized the dynamic. Adrian in full CEO mode, wielding authority like a weapon. "Your personal life becomes our business when it affects the company's reputation," said Marcus Way, the venture capitalist who'd led Meridian's Series B funding. "Dating an employee, a subordinate, opens us up to liability we can't afford. Ms. Lawson doesn't report to me. She's 4 management layers removed from my direct oversight." Adrian's voice remained level, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. "There's no policy violation. The optics are only problematic if we treat them as such." Adrian cut him off. "Emma Lawson is one of the most talented analysts this company has. She's discovered market inefficiencies that saved us millions. Her work speaks for itself." "That's not the point," Victoria interjected. "The point is perception. When our CEO dates an employee, it raises questions about favoritism, about whether she earned her position through merit or other means." Emma felt the words like a slap. Before she could stop herself, she stood up. "With respect, Ms. Chen, that's insulting to both of us." Every head in the room turned to stare at her. Adrian's expression flickered. Surprise, concern, something that might have been pride. Ms. Lawson. Victoria's tone could have frozen nitrogen. You weren't invited to this meeting. No, I wasn't. But you're discussing my reputation, my career, my relationship. I deserve to be here. Emma moved toward the table, channeling every ounce of confidence she'd learned from watching Adrian navigate corporate politics. You're right that optics matter. But what message does it send when the board punishes a CEO for dating someone they have no direct authority over? When you assume a woman couldn't possibly have earned her position on merit simply because she's in a relationship with leadership. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. That's not what we're suggesting. It's exactly what you're suggesting. Emma planted her hands on the table. I've worked at Meridian for 3 years. I have performance reviews that speak for themselves. I've published 7 internal reports that influence company strategy, and I've done all of it while dealing with people, inside and outside this company, who assume I'm not good enough, not experienced enough, not established enough to be taken seriously. Ms. Lawson, Victoria started, but Emma wasn't finished. Adrian Calloway didn't give me my job. He didn't inflate my performance reviews. He didn't write my reports or make my recommendations. All he did was see my work and recognize its value. And if that's a firing offense, then this company has bigger problems than optics. The silence that followed was absolute. Emma could feel her heart pounding, could see Adrian staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then, Adrian spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. Emma's right, about all of it. He looked at each board member in turn. I built this company on the principle that merit matters more than pedigree. That innovation comes from unexpected places, that the best ideas don't care about hierarchy or politics or how things have always been done. Adrian... Victoria's tone had shifted, warning now rather than hostile. I'm not finished. He moved to stand beside Emma, a deliberate choice that made their alliance unmistakable. You want to know about optics? Here's what I see. A board more concerned with appearances than substance. More worried about what the press might say than whether we're actually doing anything wrong. More comfortable punishing a relationship between 2 consenting adults than examining why that relationship makes you so uncomfortable. We're trying to protect the company, Marcus said. No, you're trying to protect yourselves. From change, from discomfort, from having to defend a decision that might require actual nuance. Adrian's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. I've spent 15 years building Meridian into what it is. I've sacrificed relationships, health, any semblance of work-life balance. I've made this company my entire identity because I thought that's what success looked like. He turned to look at Emma, and his expression softened in a way the board couldn't miss. And then I met someone who reminded me why I built this company in the first place. Not to prove something to my father, or to the market, or to any of you, but because I believed technology could make things better. That intelligence and integrity mattered, that the work itself was the point. Victoria's expression had shifted, still stern, but something else underneath. What are you saying, Adrian? I'm saying that I won't choose between Emma and this company, and if you force me to, you won't like the choice I make. He straightened, every inch the CEO who'd built an empire from a dorm room. Emma Lawson has done nothing wrong. Neither have I. We followed every policy, maintained every professional boundary, and conducted ourselves with integrity. If that's not enough for you, then perhaps the problem isn't us. It's what you're willing to accept as leadership. The silence stretched. Emma held her breath. Finally, Victoria leaned back in her chair. You're willing to stake your position on this? Your reputation? Absolutely. No hesitation. And if you want my resignation, you'll have it. But you'll also have the headlines explaining why. I suspect the optics of that would be far worse than a CEO dating someone he has no authority over. Marcus cleared his throat. No one's asking for your resignation, Adrian. Aren't you? Victoria and Marcus exchanged a look. Some silent communication passed between them. The kind Emma recognized from watching executive decisions get made. We'll need time to discuss this, Victoria said finally. But perhaps we were hasty. Perhaps the situation requires more nuance than we initially considered. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough. Adrian nodded once, sharp and final. Then he took Emma's hand and walked her out of the boardroom. They made it to the elevator before Emma's legs started shaking. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Did I just yell at your board of directors? You were magnificent." Adrian pulled her close, his laugh rumbling through his chest. "Absolutely terrifying and completely magnificent. They could fire you. They won't." He kissed her forehead. "Victoria knows I'm right. More importantly, she knows that forcing me out over this would crater the stock price. The board serves shareholders first, ethics second. That's cynical. That's reality." He tipped her face up to meet his eyes. "But thank you for defending yourself, for defending us, for being brave enough to walk into that room when you had no reason to." "I had every reason to." Emma's hand fisted in his shirt. "You were willing to risk everything for me. The least I could do was return the favor." "I wasn't risking anything." His voice had gone soft, intimate. "Not compared to what I'd lose if I let you go." Emma kissed him then, in the hallway outside the boardroom where anyone could see, where the cameras probably were recording, where the optics were definitely problematic. She didn't care. Adrian kissed her back like she was the only thing that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, she was. 3 months later, Emma stood in the same spot where she'd first kissed Adrian, at the penthouse window overlooking Central Park. But everything else had changed. The board had backed down, as Adrian predicted. Patricia Chen had been quietly reassigned to a different division. Emma had received a promotion, earned, not given, to senior analyst, with a new office and a direct line to the strategy team. The press had eventually moved on to the next scandal, leaving them to exist in relative peace. But the biggest change was internal. Emma had stopped second-guessing her place at Meridian, stopped waiting for someone to discover she'd been faking competence all along. She'd published a report on emerging markets that had been cited in the Wall Street Journal. She'd presented at a conference in Singapore. She'd slowly, painfully, learned to trust that maybe, just maybe, she was actually good at this. Adrian had changed too. He'd started leaving the office at reasonable hours, had stopped checking his phone during conversations, had learned to delegate, to trust his team, to acknowledge that no empire was worth losing yourself over. They'd learned together, in the quiet spaces between board meetings and data analysis, how to be two people instead of one performance. "You're thinking again," Adrian said, emerging from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. He'd finally mastered the opener. "I'm allowed to think." Dangerously allowed. He handed her a glass, settling beside her at the window. "What about this time?" "About Derek." Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. "Your ex?" "I ran into him last week, at a coffee shop in Brooklyn." Emma took a sip of wine, watching the park lights twinkle below. "He apologized, said he'd been wrong about me, wrong about us, wrong about everything." "How did that feel?" "Honestly, nothing." Emma laughed softly. "I thought I'd feel vindicated or angry or something, but I just felt neutral, like he was apologizing to a version of me that doesn't exist anymore." "Because you're not that person anymore." Adrian's arm slid around her waist, familiar and grounding. The woman who stood in the rain wasn't wrong, but she was incomplete. She hadn't learned yet what I'm still learning, which is, That the people who matter will see you, the ones who don't. They're just echoes, background noise. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Derek didn't believe you worked for me because he couldn't imagine you in a world where you mattered. That's his failure, not yours. Emma turned to face him fully, this brilliant, complicated man who'd risked his empire for a relationship that started as pretense and became something infinitely more real. I love you, she said, simple and certain. I don't think I've said that out loud yet. Adrian's expression transformed. Joy and wonder, and something almost like pain. You haven't. I've been waiting. Were you sure I would? Terrified I wouldn't. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. I love you too. Probably from the moment you told my board of directors they were full of it, but possibly earlier. Time gets fuzzy when I'm around you. Emma laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. That's the least romantic confession I've ever heard. I'm a work in progress. But he was grinning, that rare, unguarded smile that made him look 10 years younger. Give me time. I'll get better at this. You're already perfect at it. She kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise. Just don't try to write poetry. I've seen your code comments. Your romantic writing would be a disaster. Noted. Adrian pulled her closer, until they were swaying slightly to music only they could hear. Any other parameters I should be aware of? Just one. Emma rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and sure beneath her ear. Keep choosing me, even when it's complicated, even when the optics are terrible, even when it would be easier to choose the Empire. Always. No hesitation, no calculation, just truth. I choose you. Every time. Forever. And standing there in the window where they'd had their first real kiss, where they'd made promises that started as performance and became something unshakable, Emma believed him. The city spread out beneath them, millions of lives intersecting, millions of stories being written. But this one was theirs. Imperfect, complicated, built on honesty and trust, and the decision to keep choosing each other even when it was terrifying. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then building to a downpour. Emma thought about the girl who'd stood crying in a storm 3 months ago, convinced she wasn't enough. That girl had been wrong. Not because a billionaire had kissed her, but because she'd finally learned to see herself the way Adrian saw her. Capable, brilliant, worthy of being chosen. Thank you, Emma whispered. For what? For seeing me. In the rain. When I couldn't see myself. Adrian's arms tightened around her. Thank you for letting me be seen. For looking past the Empire and finding something worth keeping. They stood together as the rain washed Manhattan clean. As the city lights blurred into something almost beautiful. As the story that started with pretense became the most real thing either of them had ever known. In the end, this story isn't really about a billionaire, or revenge, or even proving an ex wrong. It's about the courage to be seen, fully, honestly, without the armor of performance or the safety of pretense. It's about understanding that love isn't a rescue or a validation. It's a choice, a daily decision to show up for someone, to let them show up for you, to build something real in a world that often rewards the shallow and the safe. It's about learning that the people who diminish you are telling you everything about their limits and nothing about yours. That being underestimated is only devastating if you believe the estimation. And it's about recognizing that sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is simply refusing to shrink, refusing to make yourself smaller, quieter, less than you are, just to make someone else comfortable. Emma Lawson learned that in a rainstorm outside a charity gala. Adrian Calloway learned it in a window overlooking Central Park. And maybe, just maybe, you're learning it too. If this story made you think about your own courage, your own worth, your own decision to be fully seen, if it reminded you that the right people will choose you not despite your complexity, but because of it, then rate this journey from 0 to 10 in the comments below. And if you believe some stories don't just entertain but illuminate, that they show us not just who we are, but who we might become if we're brave enough. Subscribe for the next chapter, because every story we share is an invitation to live a little more honestly, love a little more bravely, and choose ourselves a little more fiercely. The empire was never the point. The choosing was.